So in this particular lesson, I want to look at some of the symbolism in esoteric teachings and texts and provide a little bit more context and possibly a more gentle explanation to some of these word forms. So the three that we're going to look at today are the symbolistic representations of what and who the Egyptians might be, who the Israelites might represent, and also I want to look at the character of King Herod from the Bible. And I want to also preface this with saying that, again, the reason that I am opening up this dialogue, and the reason that essentially I'm bringing this to the forefront is because a lot of the distortion, a lot of the misinterpretations of understanding the stories lead to things like acts of violence and, improper teachings of attack. Because when we see these stories and these metaphors from a really literal sense, what happens is we tend to also act out these stories in a very literal sense. And I truly believe that's not the original reason for these stories. So the first, representation that I want to look at today is the Egyptians. And in the Exodus narrative, the Egyptians symbolize the material world and our ego. And if we can look at the Egyptians from this standpoint, from the idea that the Egyptians are simply an archetype for our own human mind, and an extension of that, the collective consciousness of the egoic mind. Not being bad or good, again, not placing any judgment on it. This is just simply another way of interpreting these texts, and the way that and by interpreting it this way, we stop all of the nonsense of a chosen people or a better people or somebody that we should kill and take a life because a book says so. So that's really the premise behind why I'm choosing to teach some of these things. So basically, if we look at the Egyptians as representing the material world, so the mind, the ego, and perhaps our attachment to these things. So the land, ownership of land, wealth, power, physical abundance, and this state of our focus on the external material world. So again, anytime that we would be looking at a story through the lens of the biblical text, if we can replace the idea of Egypt as a people or a country or something that we want to attack, and we basically replace that with the idea of Egypt representing the ego, representing anything in physical 3D form, then this is really helpful to make the readings of these esoteric texts a lot more gentle and a lot more of a roadmap and a guide for our own spiritual ascension process. Now, some of the other challenges that the higher self, so the higher vantage point, would see with the ego or the Egyptians. And these would be things like greed, things like, sorry, I'm going to my notes here, enslavement, domination, and fear. All of these things pursuits of a lower vibrational calibration of our thinking. And in the biblical texts, the Egyptians also are shown to enslave the Israelites, And this concept of enslavement really correlates to how the ego can also entrap us in our desires for, material things on the earthly plane. So it really is a way of binding our consciousness, so our individual consciousness and the collective consciousness, to these lower vibrational thought forms, or really anchoring us essentially in the third dimension. Now, I'm not going to say that being anchored, in the third dimension is a bad thing. It just simply means that in terms of our growth and our learning and our trajectory upward into the divine plan, or alignment with higher frequencies and higher dimensions, we can't achieve that upward momentum because we're so focused outward instead of inward to the physical world that we see out manifest. And I'm going to go a bit further and suggest that the physical manifestation that we see in our external world will always be there in higher dimensions. I think that it is an improper teaching and almost a scary teaching, to assume that as we raise our consciousness, that we essentially evaporate into this dark void and nothing exists and there's no experience. I think it's quite the opposite. I think as we ascend into higher states of knowledge, higher states of our own thought forms, higher states of our vibrational capacity, the out manifestation and what we actually experience on the experiential plane is actually much more beautiful than we could ever imagine. But this is also part of the enslavement and the trappings of ego. It is always going to give us a narrative. It is always going to spin a story of fear and enslavement so that we stay stuck, so that we are in bondage of that fear, of those trappings, so that we don't take that next rung up the ladder to see what's over the hill, essentially. Okay? And again, that ego seeks to control the natural flow of divine order. And the natural flow of divine order is always this upwards momentum of the consciousness, of the collective consciousness into that higher order of vibrational, not only thinking, but vibrational calibration of how we see the out manifestation of our external reality. And you have to remember that everything that we see on the external plane is a manifestation. That's also not supposed to scare you. What is a manifestation? A manifestation is an observation. So remember the particle theory. When we observe a particle, it gently collapses itself into what we see and experience as form. Now, as our spiritual sight increases, that also means that what we observe, so from the internal plane, we are the observer, to the external plane, which is the mirror that shows us what we seek to be and what we are, and our correlation to the divine. So as we raise our vibration, as an attribute of this, we are going to see a more beautiful outward expression of what reality is going to culminate as. So hopefully you're following along with me in this lesson. I'm going to go a little bit further into some of these other metaphorical symbols or guides that are utilized in the Bibles. Okay, in the Bible again, and this is one of the markers that when we look at these historic esoteric texts, and we look at our external world, we can certainly see a lot of violence because of the misunderstanding of the message. Okay, that's why I'm coming forth. That's why I'm doing my due diligence to teach and showcase this in a way that you can understand that this is a roadmap for your own psyche. This is a roadmap for you to set yourself free, for you to come out of bondage of your own lower calibrations of mind, not for you to go outside yourself and attack others because they don't believe, or hurt others, kill others in the name of God. This is nothing about those kind of ideologies have any calibration to unconditional love. Absolutely not. If we harm another, if we hurt another at any level of creation, we are doing wrong. So, even if you go and step on an ant, that's still not in line with unconditional love. We have to see all life, all that is out manifest, everything that exists here on planet Earth, that is essentially under our domain, because we are, at the top of the food chain. We are the most intelligent. We are the most apt in terms of our usage of tools and dominance over all creatures. But in this ability to have such intelligence, there is a divine responsibility, and that is to protect and to cradle all existence. This is the highest order of divine thinking, okay? So let's go back to the concept of the Israelites, okay? That's the aspiration of the soul seeking liberation. I know we talked earlier about the Egyptians. That is that idea of the egoic mind and bondage, and the Israelites see a path beyond that. That's the point when the soul, when the essence of who we are, our divine thinking, starts to illuminate itself. It starts to think of a higher point of calibration. And so it's seeking release. It's seeking release from the bondage of the Egyptians. And again, in terms of the code, Egyptians simply swap that out for the ego. In the collective consciousness, simply swap ego mind or ego consciousness out for that idea of, swap out the Egyptians in collective consciousness out for that idea of the egoic collective consciousness. And sorry, it's very early here. I was up at 4 this morning, so I was early writing these thoughts down, and I wanted to do this before I actually start my day with, my family and what I have to do in terms of my companies here. So when we look at this symbolism of the Israelites, like I said, they are freeing themselves from bondage. They are moving towards this rightful alignment with divine order, with divine mind, so that higher calibration of consciousness. And then we see their journey. So this is the universal journey, the personal journey to spiritual awakening and self-realization, that embodiment of the enlightened being, okay? But the other thing that you have to realize as we look through these stories in the Bible is the trials and tribulations that the people of Israel go through. And when I'm talking about the people of Israel, of course, I'm meaning those individuals that want to release themselves from the trappings of the egoic mind, that mind that is attached to three-dimensional external things, violence, greed, vanity, all of the trappings of the ego. And again, I want to layer this lesson to really calm your mind in terms of, I'm not saying that you're not incarnate on planet Earth on a three-dimensional plane. You 100% are, okay? We are all in a third dimensional vehicle right now. We're all in a body. This is our incarnation, and it's a beautiful incarnation because it is full of so many lessons and so much opportunity to raise our vibrational calibration, raise our spiritual sight to a higher plane. But that first comes with the identification of what the actual treasure map in essence is. Okay, we have to have that map, we have to have that guide and that remembrance. And that's what religious texts offer to us if they are interpreted correctly. So if we can actually understand that the message is not about turning outward and, knocking on door to door, forcing people to believe things that don't really make sense. I know going through this from a child, I'm just going to actually restart this so that the processing isn't too long on my camera. When, from a small child and, going to the church, learning the different stories, I was so confused because I mean, if your intelligence calibrates, around here and you start listening to all of these stories in the Bible and they're talking about killing their wives and killing their sons and killing the other people and, raping people, and you're like, oh, but this is unconditional love. But aren't you trying to teach me that God is good? But then why are all of these people doing all these weird things like that I know for sure isn't good? And why are these adults teaching me that this is something to do with unconditional love? And I remember being like 5 years old, just going, what? Like, are all of these people crazy? And so this, really set me on this search of like, this can't be right. This can't, it doesn't mix. It's like oil and water. And then, after reading so many books, so many of the ancient texts, I started to realize, no, this is about our internal journey. This is about our struggle with ourselves. And yes, there is a collective consciousness that also must do the same thing because we're all interconnected. Science proves that, and I love the language of science because it so eloquently can be duplicated. We can replicate it. It is foundational, and it explains what's going on in our three-dimensional reality. But if we can look at these metaphors and these stories that are encoded from this higher perspective, that this is actually our personal journey, and that the bondage and the attack and, even something so, scary as raping people or killing, a father killing their daughter or a brother killing their brother, this is simply about thoughts. This is about thoughts. So when we are talking about these things, we are talking about banishing our thoughts, not killing people. We are talking about putting an end to this type of thinking, not putting an end to other people. Again, not knocking on doors and forcing people to believe, or not hating people because they don't believe something that we believe, and turn in clockwise 3 times and get on your knees and all these things that humans invented. This is not and has nothing to do with divine thinking. And, all of the other crazy ideas that people have come up with, throughout history. The body is bad, the body is wrong, the body is dirty, on and on and on. Women are bad, they're evil, they're associated with this or that. Again, this is what I am going to take time to teach, okay? This is a metaphor, this is a roadmap, this is your treasure map of how to unleash your own mind from bondage. So you are the Israelite, and that is just a code. It doesn't mean that there is a chosen people on earth. The chosen people choose themselves. Those that wish to recalibrate, those that wish to elevate the nature of their mind, become an Israelite. That's the simplicity of it. Every type of teaching from every teacher throughout history has to be simple enough that the student can comprehend it. That's how it works. So I'm going to make it simple enough for you to comprehend it. You can be an Israelite. you can raise your vibration. You can look up. You can focus towards what is divine. And in and of that, what happens with the thinking of the world. No longer do we have to kill our brothers and sisters. No longer do we have to hate each other. No longer is there one chosen people against another chosen people. No longer do we need guns and bombs and grenades to blow each other up physically. This is ridiculous. This is a roadmap to how to heal the self. And when we heal the self, we simply heal the collective consciousness. And as we heal the collective, so too does the out manifestation of our world turn blissful. That's the lesson. It's simple. I'm going to go through it book by book, story by story, and show you that this is the correct way to teach these doctrines. And hopefully it won't offend anybody. But how could it? How could it offend somebody if we are simply teaching not to attack a body, to love all bodies, to love all people, and not just the body? I'm talking about the soul, to love the soul of others, and not just human others, all of the beautiful creatures that we share this planet with. I'm sitting here with the jungle behind me and how beautiful it is. There's nothing more beautiful than the natural world. If I sit in a city built with concrete, I feel very dead. When I sit in the jungle, you know, I have the monkeys and the parrots and all of the beautiful creatures around me. I feel very alive. So again, it's a reconnection to the natural world, which is also an extension of us. Again, I get very passionate about these teachings, so I can kind of go off on a tangent. But again, the Israelites go through a lot of really difficult trials and tribulations. And there's the story of the parting of the Red Seas. You know, there's many, many stories which we will go through. That again, they are stories to show that the ego's grip is firm, that you have to go through and you have to be diligent in your practice as one that is going to attune their mind to this higher state, because it's not your dominant state right now. You really love, and so, you know, so do I. We really love the ego. We really identify with the ego. So, or the Egyptians, right? This desire for the material, the temporal pleasures of the material world. They offer us a lot, you know, in terms of the way that the body interprets the journey. The body, which houses our soul, is very rooted in the material world, which isn't bad. It's learning, it's experience. I really want to teach through this dialogue, through these lessons, that experience is great. Having a body is great. This is our vehicle for learning. This is how we learn. So many beautiful lessons about kindness, compassion, love, you know, the highest ideals. The body is a great way to learn these things, okay? And the external world around us, not just the body, but everything that we see around us. It teaches courage, it teaches service, it teaches guardianship, because we are taking care of things. So we have to understand that many of the stories between the Egyptians and the Israelites in the Bible, I'm going to make this very simple in this lesson, are about the trials that the mind, the consciousness goes through when it is, overcoming the ego. And now I want to get to the last element of this story. I wanted to bring about the question of King Herod in the Bible, because we were watching one of these Netflix shows, which, you know, we're going through the 12 plagues of Egypt. Again, remember that number 12 There's a lot of symbolism here. I'm going to do a lecture on the 12 plagues of Egypt over the holiday as well. But specifically, King Herod, because he actually orders that all of the babies, all of the young little human babies are murdered, the little boy babies, because he's so afraid of this messenger, this Messiah, so that he's going to destroy all the children. And, I know that, some of the people that were around me were talking, about this story and, how horrible King Herod is. Could you imagine? And could you imagine a king ordering that all of the firstborns were murdered, and then sending his foot soldiers out and murdering all of these little babies? And to me, I'm just like, wow, this story is so crazy. But then you look out in the world and you look at some of the genocides and some of the crazy things that individuals, actual human beings, have done. And a lot of times the craziest things that people do are in the name of religion. They're in the name of misunderstanding the entire teaching. And then people, get up, that you have these cult leaders that want to do mass suicide or mass genocide or killings in the name of a story or a book, because they believe they're honoring God. They remember that idea of worship, that they're worshiping a God. But that doesn't make any sense, because God doesn't want you to kill things. God doesn't want you to murder people. God certainly does not want you to kill a bunch of babies or animals or sacrifice anything, okay? The only thing that divine source energy desires is love, protection, guidance, compassion, patience. Love is patient, love is kind. So there are some really straightforward lessons in the Bible, like the 10 Commandments, or certain prayers that make total sense. But then there's some of this really wacky stuff, okay, like King Herod. And so upon Jesus's birth, and this is the birth of the Christ consciousness. So this is when the mind becomes illuminated. And I'm not, don't kill the messenger here. I'm not saying that Jesus didn't exist. 100% I believe he did exist, and that he did teach some incredibly mind-blowing, beautiful lessons. But I do believe that once encoded, they were completely misinterpreted throughout the history of what we've seen in the world. So here the infamous King Herod gives his decree to kill all of the male infants. His decree to kill all of the male infants. And this is a representation of the ego's crazy defense system, where it is going to kill all of the small thoughts you have, all of the small aspirations that would propel you towards enlightenment. That's what this story means, is that King Herod, so the horrible king, the ego, so the ego that lives within all of us, we're going to interpret him as this horrible, wretched king, because he wants his power. He doesn't want to release anything that we are or the collective is into this higher vibrational state. So what does he do? He utilizes fear, his mighty sword of fear, and he's going to kill all of the small thoughts, all of the small beautiful thoughts within the mind. Because what does fear do? Anytime you have this great, beautiful, imaginatory thought of higher ideals and higher realms and divine things, King Herod's going to come in and make you so scared that you dare not think those thoughts again. You dare not allow your mind to expand and envision this beautiful, incredible heaven, this nirvana, this bliss. So that is why we have the story of King Herod, because he wants to kill the messenger. He wants to kill that part of you, that Christ within you, that quiet voice that's whispering about love and purpose and passion and compassion and service. So those little babies, those little tiny infants that we're talking about in these biblical stories are the little tiny birthings of the beautiful thoughts that all of us are capable of. And this is why we don't have to go out and kill anybody. We don't actually have to go out and kill anyone in the physical external world. we simply, and I mean, I'm not even going to suggest, because of course my purpose is to not teach anything of attack. I don't even want you to kill the thoughts of the ego, the thoughts of the Egyptians or the evil King Herod, because I don't believe in that. I simply want you to gently look at them, lovingly, and help them turn themselves into a higher ideal. Look at your fear, sit with your fear, create an intimate relationship with your fear, and become its protector. Simply allow it to disperse itself gently and move up that vibrational scale of highly calibrated thought forms. And that's truly the most simplistic lesson of what the Bible is trying to teach. Now there's nuances. Each story has a very cryptic yet beautiful message in it, which I will do my due diligence to teach. So hopefully this lesson was something that might put your mind at ease a little bit. When we're going into the Christmas season, when we're looking at the story of Jesus, the story of the Christ, the story of that message that he was trying to bring forth, I really want you to understand that the message was one of love. The message was one of balance, unity, protection, guardianship, and that the bondage that we experience on this earth plane is truly the bondage of lower thought forms. So fear, violence, attack, hatred, vanity. We will be going through, again, I'm going to reteach the 7 deadly sins. I know I've taught them a few years ago. We're going to go through the 7 virtues. But I'm going to delve into the psychological aspects of it, really from the functionality of how we will do these things, how we will recalibrate, and, also the lessons of, the 10 Commandments. And these are really principles. These are higher principles of how to conduct ourselves in divine mind. This is our crossing overs. As we part the Red Seas, we are parting that division essentially between the lower calibrations of consciousness into and crossing over into that highest possible calibration of divine mind at this dimension, on this dimension. So hopefully you enjoyed this lesson. I'm going to get myself into my regular day here. But, stay blessed, stay well, and start to acclimate to those higher vibrational thoughts.